Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Hannah Blackwell, and today I'm going to be bringing you my top books of 2023. I was really considering doing the mid-year book freakout tag, but honestly, I had like 5, 6, 7, maybe even more books for almost every single question in that tag, and it was just going to be too long. It was kind of overwhelming for me to consider like how I would do it. I don't know what it was about the tag this year, but it just was not working for me. So instead, let's concentrate on basically my favorite question in that tag, which is the first question, and that's like, what is your favorite book this year? And I have 12 favorite books to talk about. These books, I could not pick between them. I had to talk about all of them. So stick around if you want to hear what books I've absolutely adored so far in 2023. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do so. Don't forget to click the like button and comment down below and let me know what your favorite book or books have been so far this year. All of my social media is linked down below in the description, including my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into this video. So I have 12 books that I'm going to discuss. They're not necessarily in a particular order, but in general, we go from my least most favorite, if that makes sense, to my most favorite. In general, we are counting down, but these rankings are not like set in stone specific order, if that makes sense. The first book I'm going to discuss is Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. This is the first book in the Castles Ever After series, and I just read this and absolutely adored it. I thought it was such a fun way for Tessa Dare to bring something different to her writing, because so far I get a lot of romantic comedy, historical romance on the spicy end from her. And this had those aspects. This was funny, this was quirky, it was whimsical, and it was like a modern take on historical romance, and it was quite spicy too. But I feel like she tamed down the spice just a touch and then brought in some really fun, spooky gothic vibes. There was a bat-infested castle and just some spooky gothic vibes in general that I adored. I also loved the found family aspect in this book and just some of the quirky side characters as well. We have our heroine who's been left destitute after her father has passed away. Her father was this author. He was a very famous author for his goodnight children's books, like these fairy tale books. And unfortunately, the daughter was left with nothing. Her father was not very responsible with his money and left what was left to her cousin, who she basically despises. But one day she gets a letter from a long lost godfather who has left her something in his will. And so she goes to the address listed to meet up with someone about what has been left for her. She gets to this abandoned looking castle, this gothic castle, and a duke answers the door and is like, "Hey, what's up? Who are you?" And she tries to explain that she's there to pick up something that's been left to her. And he doesn't really know what she's talking about. Craziness ensues from there. And it is such a fun story. There's also these people that dress up in cosplay that are like super fans of these fairy tales that show up as well. And they're freaking hilarious. In general, I love the story. Our hero is dark and broody, but like super sweet on the inside. And you know that's something that I just love. And our heroine is kind of like sunshine. They've both got a lot in their past. They've both dealt with a lot and have a lot to overcome. And I just love how the story wraps up as well. This was amazing. This is definitely my favorite Tessa Dare I've ever read. Next, I have Captive of the Horde King by Zoe Draven. This is a alien romance, but it kind of has historical fantasy romance vibes, very similar to the Dothraki in Game of Thrones. And so if you are a fan of the Dothraki, maybe you should check this out. It kind of plays as Dothraki fan fiction, but I think that the tribe is called the Dokiri or something like that. Anyway, so we have this Horde King, and one day he shows up because our heroine's brother has set a fire. He's not supposed to. It gets them in trouble because it's really like a big no-no on this planet to do so, because they kind of like worship the earth and the grass. You don't set fires on the earth. They show up and they end up taking our heroine hostage as punishment. She is with like the head of this tribe, And I think the series follows like 5 or 6 of these kings and with different heroines that are with human species that are inhabiting this planet. This was really fun. I adored the hero in this. He did have that kind of grumpy barbarian kind of like feel to him, but he was actually a cinnamon roll and really worshipped our heroine in reality. But he was very gruff. There's issues with communication a little bit, even though they do kind of speak the same language, but there's still issues in terms of just like lack of translation in terms of like cultural practices and things like that. And I really like that. I do like how that comes up a lot with fantasy romance and especially alien romance. I really like that. But it is a slow burn, super, super steamy, and also I adored it. I was really surprised with how sweet it was as well. I just thought it was just like a lovely read, and I cannot wait to continue on. It's looking like this book is winning the poll on the Hideaway Discord for our Discord read along. We are trying to pick which series to read between the Horde King series and the I Married series by Regina Abel, and it looks like the Horde King series is winning. And so I'm excited to start reading that in August. So most likely we'll be reading the first book, which is this book that I'm discussing, in August, and continuing with one book a month until we finish out the series. I think it's 6 books in the series. Next, I have a super, super dark romance, and it is The Ritual by Chantal Tessier. Make sure that you check trigger warnings. Anytime, as I've said this before, anytime I talk about a romance, please just check the trigger warnings just in case, because I do often like books that might be triggering to some people, but especially this book, check your trigger warnings. It is very dark. This is a dark romantic suspense book with a secret society. It is set on a college campus, and super rich, like people basically who are, I don't know. I don't know how to describe this book. This is crazy. I do want to continue on in the series. I don't think these are the series name, but there's at least a few books that are set surrounding this secret society. But this one was very dark. It's kind of long for a contemporary romance. I believe it was like 600 pages, but I flew through it. I absolutely adored it. I don't really know how to describe this book without giving things away. I really feel like it's good to go in blind, minus, checking the trigger warnings and knowing it's a dark college secret society romance. There's a lot of dark kinks in here too. Degradation, bondage, BDSM, dubcon. I can't think of all of them. Just look it up. There are a lot of trigger warnings, a lot of kinks, a lot of stuff going on. But in terms of the plot, I think it's better to go in blind. I adored this book. I adored it so much. I want to reread it. Like, I just had the best time with it. Next, I have the only horror on this list, and that's When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. This is a horror novella set in the southeast of the United States, and it follows an African-American heroine. She's a teacher, and she goes back to the town she grew up in to go to her childhood friend's wedding. Her childhood friend is white and is hosting this wedding at this plantation that's said to be haunted. At this plantation, there has been some very hard to deal with memories from our heroine's past. This book has a lot to say about society, about racism, about our country's history with slavery. I just adored this book, and it's not super long, and I just thought I loved the spooky vibes. I especially love books set kind of near where I live because I just feel an extra connection to them, and I think that was definitely the case with this book. I've never read anything like this, and it was definitely scary. I found this book to be terrifying and really well written and an amazing read, and I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a horror or a horror novella. Okay, next, I'm unsure which book to talk about for this, but it's basically the series. If y'all been following my channel in the last few months, you know I've taken like a month and a half long break, 2 months, but I kind of want to get back into the series, and that is the Zodiac Academy. I'm holding up The Reckoning because I think it's going to be either book 2 or 3. This is book 3 in the series that were my favorite. I think I gave both of them 5 stars, so I'm just going to hold up The Reckoning. I feel like this was probably my favorite out of the 2, but they're both really, really close. I think I read the first 5 books in the series, and there are maybe 8 books out, possibly 8. This is a fantasy romance about these fae, and it's very much like Hogwarts, but with fae, with a lot of astrological influence and elemental powers. I loved this series, and I just kind of got sucked in. For a good couple of weeks there, I just could read nothing but Zodiac Academy. That really takes a lot. And people say it's like poorly written, but I don't know. Maybe it's not super amazing or beautifully written, but it takes a lot for an author to suck you in like that and get you so attached to characters and plot that quickly. I think there's a lot to be said by how Carolyn Peckham and Susan Valente wrote this book. I think they did a wonderful job of really sucking you right into the plot and getting you attached and also transferring you into this world. This was amazing, and I'm kind of stressed out about continuing on in the series because things are just going so poorly for these characters. It is heartbreaking, and I'm kind of nervous to continue on with the series because these characters have been through a lot. I don't know if my heart can handle it. I don't know if I'm in the right headspace to continue on and read book 6. But I think I'm probably going to read book 6 in July. I don't think I put it on my July TBR, but I think I am going to read it. I think I'm going to read book 6 in July. So next, I have the first of 2 epic fantasies on my favorites of the year list, and that's going to be Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. This is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty series. The first book is Grace of Kings. This is an Asian and American inspired epic fantasy series. It is very political. It is written very much like a history textbook, but with extreme character development. And I adored it. I love watching the relationships between characters and how they move and weave and flex and intertwine. The characters in this series are so interesting, and there were twists and turns and things I was not expecting. And I really cannot wait to find out what happens next in this world. The next book is The Veiled Throne. I did recently haul it, and I would like to pick it up in the second half of this year for sure. This book was just epic and amazing. There was so much action, so many things happening that I was not expecting, and the characters, like I said, were phenomenal, and the politics, scheming, and the dynamics. If you want a character-driven political fantasy, pick this series up. Next, I have a much lighter book, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is a Dragon Rider fantasy romance series that has taken BookTube and the world by storm. I'm sure you've heard about this book because it's been all over TikTok, all over every bookstore, every BookTube channel. You can't turn a corner, I feel like, at least in the bookish community, without seeing Fourth Wing. And I agreed, I love this book. I don't think that it was super groundbreaking. This just played on the perfect formulas and the perfect tropes in a fantasy romance and did them well. This was like SJM meets Divergent or The Hunger Games, more like Divergent, I would say. And I think that it was wonderful. It was really cool. I love the world. I love that she just threw you right into the plot, and the stakes were high from page 1. I loved the dragons. I don't think I've ever read dragons written so well. The dragons were so much in the forefront. They had characters, they had personalities. They were like real people, and they were so interesting. Their relationships with the dragons in the story as well. I love the romance, but honestly, the romance probably wasn't even my favorite part of this book. I think it was like the world building, the dragons, and I'm excited to see where the plot goes. This is supposed to be a 5-book series, and I just can't wait to see all the rest of the twists and turns that we're going to get from Rebecca Yarros, because there was already so many twists and turns in the first book, especially a big final twist that I know a lot of people didn't see coming, but I kind of saw coming. But it was still a really great twist that happened at the very end of the book too. So I definitely can't wait to read on. The second book is coming out towards the end of this year. Okay, so next I have another historical romance, and I feel like I really hit my historical romance era this year. I started out the year reading some historical romance. I was reading Maya Banks's, one of her Highlander series, and I read 3 books, and I think I DNF'd the third because I just wasn't my vibe, but I adored the first two. And then I kind of continued on, took a little bit of a break, but then this last month in June, I think I read like 5 or 6 historical romances, and I'm really like hitting my historical romance vibe right now. So anyway, Lisa Kleypas. This was my first Lisa Kleypas that I've ever read. It's Secrets of the Summer Night. It's the first book in the Wallflower series by Lisa Kleypas, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the heroine. I fell in love with the hero. This has the most swoony hero that I've ever read in a historical romance, bar none. I adored him. Hunt was just basically everything that I want. There was caretaking. He just was in it, and he was swoony, and he was hot, and he cared for our heroine so much. And I just loved the vibes. I loved the banter. I loved the discussions, like the conversations that they would have. I loved him. He was not royal. Like, he basically worked his way up, and he was an entrepreneur. And our heroine is looking for someone who is the ton, who is royalty or is like a lord. And so, but her family's destitute and they need the money. And anyway, she's looking for someone else. It's enemies to lovers, or more like a hate to love scenario, I would say. He really likes her, but she does not like him. She thinks that he basically just wants a tryst, which is kind of what he wants. Like, he doesn't want a relationship. He's very much a rake. She's a wallflower, hate to love. Just a lot of my favorite tropes were in this book, not to mention amazing writing and a swoony, swoony hero. If you haven't read Lisa Kleypas, don't put her off as long as I did. Pick up a book by her because I cannot wait to read more from her. This book was so freaking good. So good. Okay, next I have a very, very fun read, and that is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf by Kimberly Lemming. This is the second book in this series. Well, technically the third, because there is a novella in between that I also read and also adored, but this is the second full-length book in this series. This is a series that is fantasy romance, but it's set kind of inspired by the American Bayou, and there are basically all sorts of magical creatures and monsters. The heroines are super strong. They have attitude, they have charisma, they don't mess around, and they can take care of themselves. The heroes are cinnamon rolls who are like gruff on the outside, but adore the heroines, especially this one. This book, this werewolf, was obsessed. Now, granted, he was hit by a love potion, but he also, like, at the same time is saying, no, like, I've bonded with you. You're my mate. I already know you're my mate. And so he is just completely obsessed. So this is definitely a hero falls first scenario. And I just loved it. The comedy, like the writing and the comedy in this series, but especially this book, was so on point. There is tentacle play as well. I was not expecting that. That was interesting in a good way. This is such a good book. If you're looking for spice and fun from a fantasy romance, please check this book out. This series is unlike any other, and I want more of it, and I want more books like this. Can we please get more books like this? I loved it. Okay, so here we go. My last epic fantasy read on this list is Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. I don't think I can have a favorites of the year or even favorites of like half the year list without having a Robin Hobb on it. I don't think I ever have, and I don't think I ever will. Ship of Destiny. This is the third book in the Life Ship Trader series by Robin Hobb. You can see I've already loved it well because lots of pages get bent when you're reading a book for this long. This is like a 900-page book, and it was so good. This was such an amazing way to wrap up this series. I feel like Robin Hobb did an amazing job. There's no one like her when it comes to character development and or world building, but especially character development. There's just no one like Robin Hobb, and she puts you through the ringer. She really puts her characters in really hard situations. She goes hard, and she hurts them, and she hurts you as a reader by creating a connection with you and the characters and then like ripping your heart out. Like, she really does. This is a series about pirates and these live ship traders in Bingtown. They have these special ships that can come alive after a third head of the family dies on the ship. So then these ships come alive, and then they can travel up the Rainwild River, where there are all these amazing magical artifacts that can be traded, I guess. Anyway, there's also a pirate who wants to become king of the pirates, and there's family drama, there's politics, there is really cool sea serpents. There's just a lot going on, but it's put together in only a way that Robin Hobb can. If you haven't read a Robin Hobb before, please do. I definitely recommend starting with the Farseer trilogy. The first book in that series is Assassin's Apprentice, and I adored that series as well. I actually think I still like that series better than this one, but it's also more of my vibe. I really like that dark medieval castle feeling. I really like that series. But I've adored both, like I said. So, okay, so the last two books on this list are cozy fantasies. I've really hit my cozy fantasy era this year. It's just been what I've been living for. The Kimberly Lemming book was definitely a cozy as well. And I've just been wanting coziness, and I think that's why I've been also really into historicals recently too. But anyway, so number 2 spot, Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. I love this book. This is my favorite T. Kingfisher I've ever read. I think I've actually only read 2 books by her, but I have a million books by her on my TBR, especially after reading this and falling in love with it so much. This book is everything. We have this woman who she is a widow. Her husband has passed away, and now her husband's uncle, I think it is, has passed away and left her an inheritance, but that family locks her away because they want the inheritance. In the process, she decides that now that she's stuck in this room, she's just going to off herself. She has like nothing left to do. What is she going to do? So she unsheaths a sword that is hanging on the wall, and out pops a knight. A very swoony knight, I might add. That knight decides to help her on a quest to go get a lawyer and deal with this situation the right way, get her inheritance, and just be done with all of this family drama. So he takes her, and they gather a band of unlikely allies, and they go on a quest to go get a lawyer, come back, and it is just such a fun book. I love how T. Kingfisher brings these unlikely characters together. There's always fun animal companions as well, and this book was no different. The romance in this was so freaking sweet. I loved the romance in this book so much, and the humor as well. If you're looking for a cozy fantasy romance to pick up, it's not super spicy or anything like that, but it's just swoony and sweet and fun, and it will make you smile. Check this one out. I loved it. And finally, I don't think many of you are surprised if you watch a lot of my videos, you know how much I adored this book, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is a cozy fantasy about our heroine, who is Emily Wilde, and she is writing an Encyclopedia of Fairies because this is a historical fantasy set in our world, but if there were also fairies. She is writing like a scientific journal, basically, and trying to discover this other species of fairies that she thinks exists. One of her coworkers from the university where she works ends up joining her on this expedition. After she's been there for a little bit, she's at this cabin in, I believe it might be Norway or Finland, somewhere up there, and she is basically starting her work, and he shows up, and they have like a hate to love bickering relationship. The bickering, guys, the bickering is so right on in this. I loved it. I loved the dialogue in this book. I also liked the portrayal of the Fae. There's like different kinds of Fae in here. There's nice, like really sweet little forest Fae. There's really mean changeling Faes that are very like evil. There are these really powerful Fae that basically are so haughty-taughty above everyone else that they have zero empathy or understanding of humankind, but they basically cause disaster and destruction in their wake because they just don't get it. There's just all kinds of Fae in here, and I loved that. I adored the romance in here. I adored the found family in here. Our heroine, at first, like, she's just not getting it. She doesn't understand people that well. She's kind of just got her nose in her notes. And she's really pissing off a lot of people in this town where she is staying for her scientific research. And so it takes her a while to figure out how to not piss people off. With the help of her university comrade, he kind of like helps her kind of smooth over the situations a little bit. And the found family is amazing in here. I loved this book. I actually have the ARC now. I just got the ARC for the second book in this series. Ooh, I can't wait to read it. It comes out, I believe, in November, and I cannot wait to find out what happens next in this saga. So this is going to be a series, and I love it. I loved the characters, loved the world, loved the dialogue, loved the writing, basically adored everything. If there is a number one spot, this might be it, but it still could change day to day. But I would say 70% of days, if you ask me what my favorite book so far in the year has been, I would say this one. So there you have it, my top 12 books of 2023 so far. There has been more books that I have given 5 stars. There's other books that I have adored in this year, but I couldn't fit them into this list because I really didn't want to have more than 12 books on this list because I knew I was going to get to talking and it was going to get really long. But I loved all of these books so much. I would have to say they have been my favorites of the year so far. I would love to know what your favorites have been. If you could narrow it down to one, what would that one be? If you like this video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. All of my social media is linked down below in the description, including my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter, along with the link to the Hideaway Discord that I run with my good friend Maggie. Until next time, fellow readers, keep reading and living your best life.
But I've known you too long, it hurts.